Hi all, welcome to EduTap and welcome to a very important session in which we are going to cover a very important report, that is the World Economic Outlook. As you can see here that from the headline itself that World Economic Outlook has been launched, and in this session we will be covering the World Economic Outlook in a very holistic and comprehensive manner. And why I am saying so that this report is very important to be covered from exam point of view, because this report's name has been specifically mentioned in the RBI Grade B officer exam notification, and that is the reason this report, which is World Economic Outlook, is required to be covered from the exam point of view in a very comprehensive manner. So my dear friends, now let's move on to the report, and here you can see that the World Economic Outlook 2024 April edition has been launched recently, and the title of the report was Steady but Slow Resilience Amid Divergence. So this is basically showing the global economy, and we will be discussing and validating this particular title of this report in the upcoming slides. But before that, let's identify that what exactly is the name of organization which has recently released this report, because the very first dimension that we are required to cover when we are covering these reports is basically its very first dimension, that is the releasing body. So let me give you some hints, and you have to try me and you have to tell me that what exactly is the name of organization which releases this report. So the organization is established in 1944. This is the first hint for all of you to identify the name of the organization which releases this report. So now guys, some other important details can be mentioned as well in order to identify this report in the exam, like it can be the organization headquarter. That the organization headquartered in the Washington DC has recently come up with the report. And one more important information can be given about this, that the managing director of the organization is Kristalina Georgieva. So guys, I believe that with the help of all these three details, you will be able to identify the name of that particular organization which releases this report, and the name of the body is International Monetary Fund. So guys, when I talk about the World Economic Outlook, it is basically a survey by the IMF staff which is published twice a year. See guys, please focus on my keywords, that this is that particular report which is being published twice a year by the International Monetary Fund, a very important thing that we are required to cover from the exam point of view. Okay, so now guys, you can see here that the World Economic Outlook growth projections which is being mentioned, which has been given under this World Economic Outlook launched by the IMF, and here you can see that the years are being mentioned here across which the growth projections are being given for all these particular part. Let me tell you a very important point, that this report divides the global economies into two parts, that is the advanced economies and the emerging market and developing economies. Before moving on to that, let me tell you that as per this particular report, this classification is not based on any strict criteria, economic or otherwise. So that's why I'm not telling you any kind of criteria on the basis of which these economies are being divided into these two categories, that is advanced economies and the emerging market and developing economies. Now let's come back to the growth projections, which are the most important to be covered from the exam point of view. So guys, for the year 2023, you can see here that when we talk about the global economy, it is basically very easier to remember. Why so? Because it is going to remain same for the year 23, 24 and 25. As you can see, it is stable at 3.2%. Okay, I hope this point is clear to all of you. Now when I talk about the advanced economies, once again it is very easy, because you can see here that every year there is a increase of 10 basis points, that is 0.1%. For example, for the 2023, it is forecasted to grow at 1.6%. In 24 it will be 1.7%, and 1.8% will be there in year 2025. Now, similarly, for the emerging market and developing economies, the growth rate will be 4.3% for 2023, 4.2% for 2024, and 4.2% for 2025. Now, guys, let's come to the most important data that we are required to cover from here. That is India's GDP growth forecast. And when I talk about India, so for the year 2023, it is 7.8%, and it is going to moderate to 6.8% in 2024 and 6.5% in year 2025. So guys, when I talk about the World Economic Outlook, basically it provides these growth projections on the calendar year basis for all the other economies. But for India, it gives us this particular data on the fiscal year basis. Okay, so that is basically a very important point that you should remember, and I'm also marked the star here because India's data is one of the most important one. So from this table we have basically covered the most important data. Now there are some other points as well that we are required to cover from the exam point of view, and what exactly these are, let's move into first of all the key insights about India. From the headline itself, we can see that IMF forecasts India's economy to grow 6.8% this fiscal year. Basically, it is talking about the fiscal year 2025, that is 2024-2025. For this particular period, India's GDP is basically forecasted to grow at 6.8%. And let me tell you that this value has increased by 0.3% from the growth forecast which was mentioned in the January's projection. And when I talk about the 2025-26, this will be 6.5%. You can see here that the India's GDP growth rate will reduce to 6.5% from 6.8% from fiscal year 25 to 26. I hope this point is clear to all of you guys. So now a very important finding this particular report has given us, that is the moderation that we have seen. That earlier we told you that it will be 7.8% for the fiscal year 24. See guys, here it is mentioned, although 2023, it is basically fiscal year 24. For the fiscal year 24, this is 7.8% and a moderation has been seen from 7.8% to 6.8%. And what was the reason behind that? That was basically tightening in the monetary and fiscal policy of the country, which was really required to do. Why exactly? Because we were required to bring down the inflation, and that is the reason that the monetary and fiscal policy was tightened, and that is why we have seen the moderation in the India's GDP growth forecast from 7.8% to 6.8%. Now guys, apart from that, when we talk about the on an overall basis, India's GDP growth forecast is really very good. And why exactly it is really that strong? This basically reflects the strength in the domestic demand. The domestic demand which is there in India, as well as the consumption, it is really good and it is continued on a higher basis, and that is the reason this is being also reflected by the India's GDP growth forecast. And also we all know about the human capital of India. We know that in India, the working age population, the proportion of working age population is really very high, and that is also showing a good improvement in our GDP growth forecasts. I hope this point is also clear guys. Now let's move on to the another important data that we are required to cover, that is India's consumer price inflation, and this is stated to decline from average of 5.4% in 24 in the fiscal year 24. From 5.4% it will reduce to 4.6% and further in 4 to 4.2% in fiscal year 26. So guys, the most important data are India's growth forecast and the other one is the consumer price inflation. So both these data are very important to be covered from the exam point of view. Now as I told you that World Economic Outlook provides India's GDP growth forecast on the fiscal year basis. But let me tell you that it also gives us the data on the calendar year basis. And on the calendar year basis, India's growth projections will be 6.9% in 2024 and 6.5% in 2025. So guys, here I have mentioned all the important data. There is no required for you to make any kind of notes. You are just required to see and listen to me whatever the data I am telling you here. ठीक है? तो इंडिया की अगर हम बात करते हैं तो 7.8% फ्रॉम फिस्कल ईयर 24 इट रिड्यूस टू 6.8% इन फिस्कल ईयर 25 एंड इट विल फर्दर मॉडरेट टू 6.5% in fiscal year 26. I hope this point is clear. This was on the fiscal year basis, but on the calendar year basis, this data will be 6.9% in 24 and 6.5% in 25 on the calendar year basis. So I believe that the India related insights are very much clear to all of you. We are done with all the most important data related to India that we are required to cover from the exam point of view. Let's move on to the other important part. Before moving on to that, guys, I want to here quote one more important thing from this particular report, and that particular point is that in order to boost exports and to boost the labor force participation rate in India, there is really high potential in India. ठीक है, तो इंडिया का जो पोटेंशियल है वो काफ़ी ज़्यादा हाई है कि हम अपनी फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट्स को अगर हम इंक्रीज़ करते हैं तो हम अपने एक्सपोर्ट्स को भी ज़्यादा बूस्ट कर पाएंगे और साथ ही साथ हम अपनी लेबर फोर्स पार्टिसिपेशन रेट को भी बूस्ट कर पाएंगे. ठीक है, एक और पॉइंट था जो कि यहाँ पर IMF ने दिया है अपने वर्ल्ड इकोनॉमिक आउटलुक के अंदर. आई होप दिस पॉइंट इज क्लियर. नाउ लेट्स मूव ऑन टू the global level. So at the global level, we have already seen that the GDP growth forecast is going to remain focused and the remain steady at 3.2%. We have seen here that for 24-25 it will be 3.2%. ठीक है जी. Let me tell you that when this particular report was been released in the month of January 2024, when this update was been released, at that particular point it was 0.1% less, and now it has increased from 3.1% to 3.2% for this particular 24 fiscal year. ठीक है. As we have already covered the inflation part for the India as well, so now we will be covering the global headline inflation for the global level as well. And let me tell you that it will fall from an annual average of 6.8%. See guys, it will fall from 6.8% in 2023 to 5.9% in 2024 and 4.5% in 2025. So global headline inflation is going to reduce. I will also discuss this particular insights in the upcoming slides, that yes, the inflation at the global level is slowing down. And what is the reason behind that? We will also discuss about that. But here you can note down that global headline inflation is going to reduce from 6.8% in 23 to 5.9% in 24 and 4.5% in 25. Now guys, when I talk about the growth forecast, so let me tell you that in the upcoming part for the year 24 and 25, basically the advanced economies will undergo faster growth as compared to the emerging market and developing economies, which will experience stable growth through 2024 and 2025. A very important point, that advanced economies will be having a faster growth as compared to the emerging market and developing economies. Now let's directly cover some major key insights, but before that, a very important data that we are required to cover, that is the latest forecast. जब हम बात करते हैं growth forecast की for the 5 years from now, आज से 5 साल बाद, then it has basically been taken as 3.1%, which is lowest in the recent decades. ठीक है जी. अगर हम बात करते हैं for the fiscal year 24, तो अगर हम बात करें guys, तो IMF has raised India's GDP growth forecast to 7.8% from 6.7% in its January report, जो कि हमने बात की थी. But अगर हम बात करते हैं latest forecast for the global growth 5 years from now, it will be 3.1% because it is at its lowest in this particular decade. A very important point guys that we are required to cover from the exam point of view. I hope this particular point is clear to all of you. Now जब हम बात करते हैं projection for the global growth, when we talk about the projection for the global growth in 2024 and 2025, it is basically below the historical annual average of 3.8%. Another important point that we are required to remember from the exam point of view, let me again repeat you that the projected global growth for 2024 and 25 is below the historical annual average of 3.8%. Now let's move on to the other key points. So guys, the global economy had basically remained remarkably resilient. Resilient means the ability of the entity to recover. And here we have seen basically that it is basically showing a steady growth at the global level, and that is the reason that the global economy was remarkably resilient. And I told you that inflation is slowing down almost as quickly as it rose. और जब हम बात करते हैं expansion global economy की, although it is doing good, but it is still low with when we compare it with the historical standards. And what was the reason behind that? The reason behind that is the high borrowing cost. Borrowing cost was really high. There was the withdrawal of fiscal support. There was a long-term impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we all know that Russia-Ukraine, the war between the Russia and Ukraine has also caused an impact on the global economy, and we have seen that that is also the reason that why exactly this growth in the global economy is basically little slower as compared to the historical standards. So guys, with this particular part we have covered the global key insights, and now let's move on to the another important part which you can always see, and what exactly the steps we can take in order to improve the position of the global economy. We can see here with the recommendations which are being given by the World Economic Outlook. And the very first thing that it provides, that the governments, the countries should start building their fiscal buffers. What exactly it means? That is to undergo credible fiscal consolidation. Guys, fiscal consolidation का मतलब क्या है? That is basically to reduce. So guys, fiscal consolidation का मतलब है to implement such kind of policies with the help of which we can reduce the accumulated debt and we can minimize the deficits. और ये हम कैसे कर सकते हैं? By increasing the revenue and by reducing the expenditure. The other important thing is basically improvement in the human capital. We all know that human capital is one of the major pillar of any economy, और इस human capital को हमें work out करना चाहिए, because we can see that we are having a large young populations in the developing countries. और जब हम बात करते हैं एज पर वन ऑफ द डेटा विच इज बीइंग मेंशन्ड बाय दिस पर्टिकुलर रिपोर्ट, इट स्टेट्स दैट जो डेमोग्राफिक डिविडेंड है इट इज गोइंग टू सपोर्ट द ग्लोबल लेबर सप्लाई. दैट मीन्स यहाँ पर जो हम माइग्रेशन की बात करते हैं, द कंट्रीज जहाँ पर बहुत ज़्यादा पॉपुलेशन है, देयर इज अ एनफ ऑफ द ह्यूमन रिसोर्स, और जहाँ पर उसकी कमी है तो वहाँ से पीपल कैन माइग्रेट टू सच काइंड ऑफ प्लेसेस सो दैट दे कैन गेट एनफ इकोनॉमिक अपॉर्चुनिटीज. ठीक है, तो इससे क्या होगा, उस कंट्री, वो वाली कंट्री जहां पर इसकी कमी थी वो भी पूरी होगी, एंड बोथ द कंट्रीज कैन बेसिकली ग्रो. ठीक है जी, तो यहां पर हम देख सकते हैं दैट इन द मीडियम टर्म ऑलमोस्ट 2 ऑफ द 3 वर्कफोर्स एंट्रेंट्स, सी गाइस, अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट, दैट ऑलमोस्ट 2 ऑफ द 3 वर्क एंट्रेंट्स would come from India or the sub-Saharan Africa, because I have already told you about India that India के अंदर working age population is really great. So guys, अगर हम बात करते हैं demographic dividend की, what exactly it is that? It is basically the growth in the economy due to the change in the structure, due to the change in the age structure of the working population. That means the share of the working population increases as compared to the share of the non-working age population. So this is a very, very important point that you should know about this particular part. ठीक है, apart from that, this particular report stresses the need for a huge global investments for a green and climate resilient future. So guys, these are basically the recommendations which are being given by the IMF in its World Economic Outlook to improve the position, to improve the status of the economy at a global level. ठीक है, I hope that these recommendations are very much clear to all of you, and these data are really very important to be covered from exam point of view. You can always use them in the descriptive part as well as in the objective part. And guys, why, as we told you that this report is really very, very important to be covered, because we have seen PYQs, we have seen questions in the last year RBI Grade B Officer 2023 exam coming from the World Economic Outlook. So guys, apart from this, we are also required to cover some other important details about the IMF, because it can also become a part of the question in the exam. So guys, when we talk about IMF, so it basically is a global organization which works to achieve sustainable growth and prosperity for all of its 190 member countries. Number of members are 190 of the International Monetary Fund. ठीक है, it is basically governed by and accountable to its member countries. So guys, यहाँ पर मैं आपको बता दूँ, as you can see here that this particular organization promotes a financial stability. तो कैसे economies को stable किया जाता है? By using 3 important ways. What exactly 3 ways are guys? That is very, very important to be covered. कि वो exactly 3 ways क्या हैं जैसे ये economies को support करती है, stabilize करती है. First thing is by monitoring the global condition and identifying the risks which are being faced by the economies across the globe. The second important thing is by providing the technical assistance. ठीक है, technical assistance provide करेगी and providing short term financial loans during the financial crisis. And the third one is basically it advises the countries, its members, to how they can improve their economies. Okay, so I hope that these 3 things are very much clear to all of you. Now let's move on to some other important part, that when this particular organization was founded, so there were 44 founding member countries, and this organization was established in 1944 in the aftermath of the Great Depression of the 1930s. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पर ब्रेटन वुड्स का नाम काफ़ी ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है गाइज, जो आप सभी को पता होना चाहिए. ठीक है, so guys, apart from that, the IMF is able to lend about $1 trillion to its member countries. Another important thing that we are required to cover from the exam point of view. ठीक है, तो IMF के बारे में हमने इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ें कर ली हैं गाइज. अब हम बात करते हैं, जब हम ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल स्ट्रक्चर की बात करें IMF की, सो बोर्ड ऑफ गवर्नर्स इज एट द टॉप ऑफ इट्स ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल स्ट्रक्चर विच कंप्राइजेज ऑफ वन गवर्नर विच इज यूजुअली द मिनिस्टर ऑफ फाइनेंस और द गवर्नर ऑफ द सेंट्रल बैंक एंड द वन ऑल्टरनेट गवर्नर फ्रॉम ईच मेंबर कंट्री. ठीक है, सो गाइज जब हम बात करते हैं पावर्स की IMF की, सो दे आर बेसिकली वेस्टेड इन द बोर्ड ऑफ गवर्नर्स एज इट इज द टॉप, इट इज एट टॉप ऑफ इट्स ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल स्ट्रक्चर. So guys, apart from this, there is an executive board in the IMF which basically takes care of the day-to-day activities in the IMF, and the managing director is the head of this particular IMF staff and the chair of the executive board. And it is assisted by the 4 deputy managing directors. The name of them are being already mentioned here. That is Geeta Gopinath, who is an Indian person, then Bo Lee, Kenji Okamura and Antoinette Sayer. So basically, these are the 4 deputy managing directors of the IMF at present. I hope that this point is clear to all of you. So we have covered another important information of the IMF. Now let's practice some particular questions and identify that what exactly the question can be asked in the exam. And there is a surprise for all of you, because you can see here this particular paragraph which was being asked in the RBI Grade B Officer 2023 exam. And from the very first question, you can see that it is being asked that which of the following report has been mentioned in the above passage. That means after reading out this paragraph, you are required to identify that which report has been asked, and then the questions on this report will be asked in the exam. So here the right answer will be IMF World Economic Outlook. So guys, the information that I have told you about IMF, that where it is headquartered is, who is the managing director, in which year it was being established, तो वो कौन सा रेजोल्यूशन था जिसके अंदर ये पर्टिकुलर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को सेटअप किया गया था, these kind of information can be given to you in this particular paragraphs in the exam. Okay, so now let's try to answer the following questions. So very first question is, as per the report, India's GDP growth projection for 2024-25 is raised by 30 basis points, citing buoyant domestic demand. So you have to answer what exactly this particular right answer will be. So as per this discussion on this particular report, we have seen that it is going to be 6.8% for the 24-25, and that is the right answer to this question. Moving on to the next question. This question was also being asked in the previous year exam. In the RBI Grade B Officer 2023 exam, the question was, the database for the above report is created during the biannual exercise. I told you this report is established twice a year, so which begins in dash and dash of each year and results in the April and September अक्टूबर. ठीक है, बेसिकली अप्रैल एंड सितंबर और अक्टूबर मंथ के अंदर इस रिपोर्ट को रिलीज किया जाता है, और आपको बताना है कि ये जो एक्सरसाइज है ये कौन से मंथ में स्टार्ट की जाती है. ठीक है, so what exactly that particular month is, that is basically in the month of January and June when these biannual exercises are being started. So we have covered the 2 important questions, guys. Now the third question is a homework question for all of you, and you were required to tell me the right answer to this question in the comment section, and I will see that who has given me the right answer in the comment section. Okay, so this question is on the same report across the different dimensions, across the different lines which we have already discussed in this report. So please pause this particular session and tell me the right answer in the comment section of this particular session. So okay, that was all from this very important IMF's World Economic Outlook. And if you are still new to our YouTube channel, kindly subscribe it and press the bell icon to receive all the latest updates of the courses and videos offered by us. And you can also join our Telegram channel in order to बेसिकली डाउनलोड द पीडीएफ ऑफ दिस पर्टिकुलर सेशन. तो आज के सेशन का पीडीएफ आपको मिलेगा टेलीग्राम चैनल के अंदर, जिसका लिंक आपको डिस्क्रिप्शन के अंदर दिया गया है. ठीक है गाइज, सो इट वाज ऑल फ्रॉम द टुडे सेशन. आई बिलीव कि आप सभी को आज का सेशन काफी ज्यादा इंफॉर्मेटिव लगा होगा, एंड यू मस्ट हैव लाइक दिस पर्टिकुलर सेशन, एंड इफ यस यू कैन मेंशन दैट इन द कमेंट सेक्शन एज वेल. And if you want, if you are having any kind of query, you can just mention your query in the comment section, and you can also share your queries at hello@edutap.co.in, and you can also call us at 8146207241. So we will keep on coming with such kind of sessions. Till then, stay happy, stay healthy. Wish you all happy learning.